Hello, Seven, and welcome back to the channel. My lord, it feels good to say that. It has been a long month. I apologize for there being no content on the channel at all. I've just been mental busy with work, and then I run into hardware issues. I've had personal commitments, I've had family commitments, I've had traveling. It's just been absolutely bonkers. So, however, we are back to normal now, so videos will resume as per usual. So please do forgive me. Anyway, welcome to my ultimate guide. I wish I could do some editing on that to make it sound really cool, but unfortunately you've just got me. Anyway, welcome to my ultimate guide to LMU VR. This realistically will work for any VR game on PC VR, particularly when it comes to Quest, Pico and Vive users as well. You boys, I'm going to be looking out for you, so keep an eye on this video. This is the settings. There is no YouTube or hyperbole in this either, by the way. This is actually a very lengthy guide. This will go through a lot of the stuff you need to get LMU running extremely well in VR and looking on top of it as well. So, okay, so first let's go over my PC hardware. As I've said in previous videos, I am running a 7900 XTX with 24GB VRAM. I am running a 7800 X3D CPU, and I'm running 32GB of DDR5 RAM at 6000 MHz. I think that's correct. Anyway, it's a pretty beefy PC. If you're running something a little bit older, you may have to tweak some settings, but I am going to give you all the stuff in this video to get 72 FPS, to get 120 FPS, and to get 90. You think I could think of a better order for that, wouldn't you? They don't really go in that order. So first off, software for every VR user. First off, you're going to need something called OpenXR, and then you're going to need OpenComposite. For Pimax users, there's a version of OpenXR called Pimax XR. Use this instead. What this will do is it will replace Steam VR as what's known as your VR runtime, though you do still need Steam VR installed, so don't get rid of that. The links to everything will be in the description below. OpenXR will allow you to have more stable VR performance, and in some cases even increase your FPS, and allow you to tweak some key settings we're going to get into later on. OpenComposite will simply complement OpenXR, giving you even better VR performance. Okay, so now I've told you everything you need. Actually, let's go through and start getting it done. So what I'd like you to do is download and install OpenXR Toolkit. Don't do anything with it just yet, but open it up and that's fine, just leave it there. Then you're going to download OpenComposite. What you're actually going to do with OpenComposite, there's no actually install required. So what I'd like you to do is just download it, unpack it, and then move it to a different folder somewhere. Once you've done that, you can then go into the folder and then you can double click the OpenComposite application there. That'll open up this window here. So first we're going to cover OpenXR Toolkit, and then we're going to get into OpenComposite. So OpenXR Toolkit, when you open it, it's going to look something like this without the applications in the bottom. First thing you're going to do here is you're going to come to your on-screen menu hotkeys and set these to something that makes more sense to you. I use my arrow keys on my keyboard, but it's basically just drop down and pick the ones that you want to use. Then I set mine as a control modifier. Reason I do that is so that I can still use my arrow keys when I'm in game for some games if I need to, without actually opening up the OpenXR menu within the VR headset. Next up, OpenComposite. What you're going to do with OpenComposite, I say double click the application, this box here will open up, and then you've got these two options here. Switch to OpenComposite, which is currently grayed out for me, and then switch to Steam VR. Click switch to OpenComposite, and then you're free to launch Le Mans Ultimate. Once you've done this with a few games, what you can do is you can click the configure button here, which will open up a different window, which I drag this in from my ultrawide. And then you can actually go through here and you can right click, say iRacing, for example, and you can tell to always use OpenComposite. Or if it's just a game that you don't want to use OpenComposite with, you could tell to always use Steam VR. And then you go that way. Okay, so the next part is just for the MetaQuest 3 people. What we're going to do is we're going to cover two things, actually. We're going to cover my headset and how I do my headset. And then we're actually going to get into the software you actually need to get this sorted. So this is going to help for Pico, for Vive, and for Quest headset users. So the first thing I want to talk about, though, is purely for the Quest 3. This is the headset I use. So the Quest 3, but this is the strap I've got. So I run the Bobo VR strap. And the reason why I run this strap is A, it sits on my forehead. But also B, if you look there, I'm not wearing any faceplate at all. So I've got nothing there at all. What that actually allows me to do is it allows it to just sit just in front of my eyes. But it allows me to get air to my face as well. So I don't actually get too hot. So I don't get that sweatiness in there. So I thoroughly recommend this if you're going to be doing longer sessions. It is absolutely fantastic. And it does come with a battery slot on the back as well. Next thing I actually recommend is this bit here that you can just see as well. This is a USB-C to RJ45 adapter. What this is actually going to do is it means you can disable your Wi-Fi and you can actually run this straight into your router as well. So, and then you get one that's with a power connector that you plug a USB-C into, which could be your link cable. So, Quest people, Vive people, and Pico users, What you want to be doing is you want to be getting something called virtual desktop. We're going to go into the headset in a little bit. We're going to cover off what virtual desktop does and the settings I use for virtual desktop. And then, but for that to work, you actually need to have virtual desktop streamer installed on your PC as well. And then you pair virtual desktop on your headset to this one here. So when you first open it, you're going to get to this accounts page here. Just enter your meta username. So mine, funny enough, is justdave_gg. Then you can get into bindings if you want. I haven't touched anything to do with bindings. Options, this is where the key parts for this piece of software come in. So the preferred codec. So if you're running a 7 series or newer AMD card or a 40 series or newer NVIDIA card, you want to be running AV1 10-bit. So this is only for the Quest 3. The Quest 2 can't take AV1, I believe. So if you can't run into those, or you can't use those, then you want H.264 or H.264 Plus. Those are the best options you're actually going to get for that. Your OpenXR runtime, you want to be using VDXR. That's Virtual Desktop's own proprietary version of OpenXR. It works well with OpenXR, so make sure you enable this as well. Audio streaming, you can have this going straight from your computer only, or your VR headset only, or computer and VR headset. You can use the virtual audio driver. Then allow remote connections you want enabled. Automatically adjust bitrate. Make sure that you've got this enabled. I know it seems counterproductive because you might think, well, I don't want to adjust that. If you disable this, you are going to get stuttering at some point as Virtual Desktops tries to figure out what bandwidth you've got on your network. So even though 200 megabits per second doesn't sound like a lot, and it's not a lot, for some reason, if you've got someone streaming Netflix, etc., you might find that drops a little bit. If you have the little adapter thing that I'm on about here, you're not going to run into that. However, just leave this enabled, and you're probably going to stay at the 200 megabit per second anyway. So I always start mine with Windows, and I start minimized to the system tray. Other than that, there's nothing else here really that I've touched, but I am going to go into this here. So we're going to go into the headset anyway and cover off OpenXR. That's going to do what these two options here are talking about, which is the horizontal FOV tangent and the vertical. What that's going to do is it's actually going to draw some black bars at the top and bottom or the sides, depending on what you choose. NVIDIA users, you are going to have an extra option here. I forget what it's called, but you want that option enabled. And then the other two here, I just leave these absolutely blank. There is one that I've seen before, which is adaptive quantization. Hard word to say. Adaptive quantization. What this actually going to do is it's going to reduce pixelation within the dark areas. I didn't really see any issue with that at all. So I don't have this enabled. I did see a performance hit with this, and it wasn't really giving me anything visual that I cared about. So I've just left that disabled. If you are experiencing artifacting in dark areas, maybe think about turning that on. But that is the virtual desktop streamer. We're going to get the headset now. We're going to cover virtual desktop and the settings within virtual desktop purely for Quest, Pico, and for Vive users. Okay, so here I'm in the Quest headset. What we're going to do now is cover virtual desktop. So go to your Meta store, and then you're basically going to buy virtual desktop. I think it's about £15. It's definitely worth it. It's absolutely fantastic when it comes to streaming. So I'm going to try and keep my head as still as I possibly can, which is not exactly the easiest when you're wearing a VR headset. Okay, so when you first come in to virtual desktop, you are going to want to make sure you connect to your PC. Just follow the instructions that will take you through that. Environments, that's going to basically be this environment we're sitting in here. So just set that to whatever you want to set it to. Games, whatever you use in virtual desktop, launch your games from within this menu here. Apart from iRacing, it doesn't work for iRacing, so just bear that in mind. When you go into virtual desktop, launch the Mons Ultimate from here, just simply by clicking it with your controller. Inputs, there's nothing in there that we care about. Settings, what we're actually going to do is just cover off some of the useful settings in here. So environment quality, doesn't really matter. I just set mine to medium. Frame rate for this bit here, I set to 72 FPS. Boost clock rates, that's the one that you want to turn on. Make sure that you are plugged into the wall when you do this, so you're actually charging your headset. And then I also do increase the color of vibrance. And then your desktop bitrate, I just max out to 120. You're not in this for very long anyway. Streaming. Okay, this is where we're going to get into how we make LMU and any other PC game look fantastic. So, VR graphic quality. This is basically going to determine the quality of the graphics you see within the VR headset. So I set mine to Ultra because I've got a 7900 XTX. I could run this on Godlike, and I can run this on Godlike if I'm not recording. However, when I start recording, I then run into performance issues, so I set mine to 1 below. If you basically find that you're not getting the performance you want, then try just lowering this to an area that's actually acceptable to you, and just see where you go from there. VR frame rate. So I'm currently on 72 FPS. You can run this on 90 or 120. 80 is somewhat pointless. I don't really use that. VR bitrate, just set this to the maximum and leave it. And then sharpening, I like mine nice and sharp, so I set mine to 100%. Then we're going to come here. I turn the gamma down slightly. This is personal preference. Synchronous space warp, what this basically is frame gen for VR. So if you're really struggling for performance, you can enable this, but you are going to get some form of, it's not quite ghosting, but some of the break marker boards are going to look slightly double visioned, where the black of the text meets the white of the background board. So I tend not to actually turn this on, but it is always an option you've got. I don't recommend automatic. Either disable it or always enabled. If you go automatic, you're going to encounter stutters as it enables and disables. So into the advanced options, Snapdragon Game Super Resolution. What this is actually going to do is it's going to upscale the image in your headset further by allowing the headset itself to start upscaling the image for you as well. This is what's going to give you that extra sharp clarity that a lot of people seem to be missing in VR. So make sure you enable this. Video buffering, I turn on. The track controls, I turn on. Increase color vibrance, and then increase video nominal range, and then show performance overlay. What that's going to do is when you get into the game, if you get your VR controllers and you click both thumbsticks in, you'll have a box that appears at the bottom, and that's going to show you your performance of your computer. So it's not going to go into things like GPU headroom or CPU headroom, unfortunately, but it will tell you if you're suffering network latency or if you're suffering game latency, that sort of thing. So that's virtual desktop from within the Quest headset. So there's the performance overlay you can see in the bottom here. But what this is going to do is it's going to tell you the codec you're running, it's going to tell you the runtime you're running. You'll know everything is working well when you see VDXR plus OC. That is the virtual desktop XR version, which does utilize OpenXR, and it's got Open Composite over the top of it. Okay, so you know if everything is working correctly, when you log into LMU, you're going to get a window that pops up with OpenXR telling you to navigate to the menu. So this is the first page that you're going to come into here. Fairly self-explanatory for some of them. So open overlay, or the overlay, sorry. I set mine to FPS just to show the FPS. Once I'm comfortable with everything and everything's set up and I know I'm getting the target FPS I'm after, usually I turn that off. You do have advanced as well, and then you have developer. When you're bench testing, I thoroughly recommend you actually look at the developer option. Okay, so now we're going to get to upscaling within OpenXR. So upscaling or sharpening, there are three options available. You have NIS, you have FSR, and you have CAS. If you're struggling performance or you basically just want to get some more headroom, what I'd actually recommend is you go to FSR, which I need to get across to, and then I would turn off anamorphic, and then you've got size here. What this is actually going to do is it's actually going to downscale your resolution a little bit. It's going to make your image not seem quite as sharp, but it is actually going to give you some performance back. So I would take this down to about 90% if I'm struggling for performance. And that doesn't affect the image quality too much, but it does give you that extra performance back. So that's always an option available to you as well. And one thing worth noting as well is if you are going to change settings like this, you'll see in the bottom it says restart the VR session to apply changes. Make sure you quit the game that you're playing and then go back in and the changes will take effect. Turbo mode is experimental. I've tried it on, I've tried it off. I didn't see any difference with it on or off, so have a play around. It may be different on your system. But again, I've not seen anything happen with it. So frame rate throttling, we're going to leave off. Record statistics, we're going to leave off. So we're going to go all the way back up to the menu at the top. And then we're going to look at appearance. Post-processing, you can turn that on and it'll allow you to add contrast, brightness, exposure, etc. to your image within the headset, as well as the world scale. We're going to play with the world scale within the LMU settings anyway, so there's nothing we need to do here for that. For iRacing and things like that, that might be useful. So I'm going to turn that back off, and then we're going to go to inputs. There's nothing to do in the input section, so I just leave that as it is. System. So now we get into the better part of OpenXR and the things you can actually do with it. So if you're running, say, the Quest Link and you're finding the image really grainy, not very sharp, just a bit blurry, you can actually do what's called override resolution. Come in here and then you can set the resolution you want to run it at. However, I do not recommend you run this with Quest Link. So we're going to turn that off because I'm not going to be using that. However, that is an option available to you as well. So we're going to go past the color gains because that's all personal preference. And then we're going to come down to field of view. When you log in, it is going to be set to simple and then you can adjust it from there. Personally, I go to advanced. These are the settings I use. So what this is actually going to do is, if you look at, say, the up and down, what it's going to do is it's going to give you a black image at the very, very top and the very, very bottom of your VR headset. That's pixels that your VR headset or your GPU don't have to render. So therefore, that helps you improve your performance. So it's going to do two things. One, it's going to increase your FPS and increase your stability. Two, it's going to decrease your GPU headroom. And then a third benefit as well is it actually sharpens the image. I don't know how this works. I'm not going to pretend to understand this. When I don't have the, or when I have this set to 100%, the image is a little bit blurrier. When I take it down, then I notice that the image gets sharper instantly. So take this down to a level that is comfortable for you. I have run it at 75 on the left and right and top and bottom. Gives you a bit of a boxy image. And I find that worked really, really well for performance. However, since doing like a Windows reinstall and everything else, I found that actually I've got so much more performance that I don't actually need to use that. I do take it down just to give me that sharpened image though. If you're a content creator, just pay attention to this, because if you do the up and you set it to 60, which is what I normally run when I'm not recording, that's going to give you, basically remove everything you don't need to see. But when you actually go to record your footage in OBS, it'll look like you're looking down the whole time. So just be very, very mindful of that. And the opposite will occur if you go for the down one as well. So that's the settings I use within OpenXR. What we're going to do now is I'm going to Alt-Tab into the game, and then we're going to go through my in-game settings. So I did promise you the fact that I had settings for 72 FPS, 90 FPS, and 120 FPS. So we're going to get into those now. So this should cover most of the things that you actually need to know. So what I've got here is the resolution. So mine set to the full ultra wide, purely just because I want to be able to record footage. If you're not recording footage, this doesn't really matter because you're going to end up turning off the display mirror anyway. However, what I have found is when you go for a smaller, more square image rather than the ultra wide, you get less aliasing on the lines up here and everything like that, and all these lines here. So what you can do is set that to 1920 by 1080, and then you can leave it at that. Refresh rate, make sure this is always set to be above your VR headset. For some reason, in LMU, if you set it to 60, or if you're on a 60 Hz monitor, that does tend to affect your FPS in VR. I don't know why. It's the only game I've got that actually gives me this problem. So make sure you're at 144 Hz if you're on a 144 Hz monitor. Then vertical sync, I disable mine. Post effects. So post effects is a weird one. Post effects doesn't do as much as you think, but it does actually cost you GPU headroom. So you can run this on high, but you are going to take a bit of a hit. You can run this on low, but then it's going to look like your cockpit in your car is it's like someone's got a lamp on in there. So I set mine to medium. I find that to be the happy balance. Motion blur is irrelevant. MSAA to 8 times. Now this is for the more heavy end or high end PCs. If you're running a low end PC, set this to 2 times. If you're running a really, really low end PC, you can turn it off and you can disable or enable, FXAA. Or if you want, you can have both of these combined. Multi-view, that is for multi-monitor or triple monitors, irrelevant for us for VR. If you are a content creator, make sure you keep this option on so you can actually record your screen. If you don't have something you need to record, just turn that off, and then when you actually get into the track, your LMU screen will go black. It saves you a little bit of headroom on your GPU. So it's not a huge amount, but it is, every little bit helps, right? So okay, so now we're going to get into my 90 FPS settings. What I run here is basically what you can see on screen. Circuit detail to medium, texture detail to high, player detail high, opponent medium, 4 times anisotropic, special effects to medium, shadows to high, shadow blur optimal, soft particles to low, raindrops to medium, road reflection medium, and environment reflections in medium. Then I run 25 cars. If you're starting to struggle for performance on this, but you're only just under, just reduce the amount of cars. That's going to save you quite a decent bit of performance as well. You can take this all the way down to 10 or 12. Live TV displays, I have mine set to trackside only. You can set them to on, or you could turn them off. I don't really notice these anyway, to be perfectly honest, so I could probably just leave these off. And then everything else here is personal preference. Now we're going to get into a key thing that I haven't seen on any other video, and I only found this out the other day. So world scale. World scale is something I've just found out about, and I'll put a graph on the screen so that you can actually see the number you should be going to. But based off your IPD, so the distance of your eyes, you should adjust your world scale. I didn't realize this was a thing until I tried it. It was actually today I tried it, in fact. And it makes such a difference. The cars are larger. The car you're in is larger. The steering wheel is actually larger. It makes a huge, huge difference. So if you're a IPD of 67, then you want to be looking at 0.86. The numbers will be on the screen for anyone who's on a different IPD than that. But have a play with this and see what you think of it. I think it makes the game look better. Okay, so this is my 90 FPS. So it's called flat screen because this is also what I run in flat screen, so I can run it at 180 Hz. So circuit detail medium, texture high, player detail medium, opponent detail medium, 16 times anisotropic, special effects set to medium, shadows to low, optimal for shadow blur, soft particles set to low, raindrops, road reflection, and environment reflection medium. And then I'm on 20 cars. Again, you can lower this if need be. I'm going to turn the live displays off because I don't need them. Now we're going to get to the 120 FPS. Now this is not, on my PC, this is not locked 120 FPS. But once the race actually calms down, you will likely be at 120 FPS. So use this at your own discretion and see if you've got a more powerful PC, you'll get away with this. So these are the settings here. Basically, most of the things are on low. So circuit detail low, texture detail high, player detail low, opponent detail low, 2 times anisotropic, medium, special effects, shadows on low, shadow blur to optimal. You can turn this off and you'll get even better performance. Soft particles set to high, raindrops, road reflection on medium, and environment reflection on low. And then I've got the visible vehicles set to 12. So those are the settings I use in game. So what we're actually going to do now is we're actually going to pop the headset on. We're going to cover a couple of little things within the game that some people may or may not know about. First thing I'd like you to do is actually come to your control setting, and I'd like you to search for the word seat, and then adjust your seat forward, backwards, up, and down. Once you've done that, if you're not aware of where to find the recenter button, you're just going to basically search for VR. And then there is your recenter or your center head position. So what we're actually going to do now is we are going to jump into the car, and then we're just going to cover something that not many people either know about or talk about, which is mirrors. When you first get into the game, your mirrors are going to look something like this. All off to the side, and you're not going to be able to see anything at all. So how you actually get around these is your control button is for your left mirror, your left alt is for your right mirror, and then that's the two that we're going to be focusing on. So control and then seat backwards will turn the mirror to the right or towards your car, and then forwards will turn it the other way. That's the two you care about. And then if you want to cycle through your mirrors, it is button number 3 on your keyboard. You'll be able to turn the virtual mirror off and all the mirrors in the car off. If you're struggling with performance, then you could turn the mirrors off. Sadly, there is no way just to have the virtual mirror at the minute. The devs are aware of this, and it's something they are going to end up working on. However, it's more of a kind of when we get time, we'll look at this. That's pretty much the only settings we actually need to cover for when we're actually in the car. What I want to do now is actually want to tell you how you actually benchmark this game properly in VR. Okay, so Future Dave here. I've got to the editing part and realized this video is already horrendously long. So rather than actually go through the in-game stuff of how to actually bench test and everything else, I'm just going to tell you what you need to do. So go to an AI race at Bahrain, set it to nighttime so it's dark, go into the weather settings and set it to overcast and storm. You're only interested in the first part of the race. You don't really care about anything else. Get into the formation lap. You're going to know very, very quickly if your settings are wrong or if you're good to go. The formation lap, you're possibly going to see a slight performance drop, nothing too major. And then when you get to turn 1, when the race starts, that's where you're going to encounter any performance issues. That's the hardest corner on the course to actually render in VR. So if you get a massive performance drop there, then you know your settings are wrong. You need to go back and change some settings. What I would accept here as a successful benchmark pass would be if you are minus 10% of your target frame rate. If you're within that range on turn 1, then you're good to go. So it's as you go round the hairpin at turn 1, you start to face the trees just before the left-hand bend. Then that's where you're going to encounter your problems. So there we go. That's how you bench test LMU properly. Don't go hot lapping on Spa or Fuji or somewhere else during the day. Put it through its paces properly so that when you get into an AI race or when you get into a multiplayer race, you're not going to have any unexpected surprises. So there we go. I hope that's been useful to you. That's my settings for LMU, my ultimate guide. I hope someone learned something from it. It's been an absolute monster video to put together. I have tried to get this together a few times. As you can imagine, there is a lot of testing. There is a lot of benchmarking. There is a lot of to and froing. And there's been a lot of issues on the back end when it comes to my PC and my personal life and everything else. So if you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up. This will tell YouTube that you should give this video to other people like yourself. And if you do like what I do on the channel, please do think about subscribing. It does mean a hell of a lot. And if you do subscribe to the channel, I will give you 10 free FPS in your VR headset. Until next time, I've been Just Dave, reminding you all to keep your rub upside down. And remember, we do this for fun. So be nice to each other. Till next time, take care.